What's up, everybody? Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com, HAWGsports.com. Good to be back with you guys today in stunning high definition. Arkansas coming off of, a sweep, I guess, of the regional, beating North Dakota State, beating Creighton, and then beating Creighton again, and we'll advance to the Super Regional. We're going to bring on Kevin Bohannon first on the show today to talk about some of that, of course, and we'll bring in Danny West as well, who's back from vacation. Arkansas had a big recruiting weekend, so we'll talk about that. We'll get to your questions, talk a little bit of football, all that and more on today's episode of Hog Sports Live. I want to give a shout out first to the North Wanger, Frank Ragnow, retiring from the NFL. 29 years old, was an all-pro, but says these past couple of months have been very trying as I've come to the realization that my football journey is ending and I'm officially retiring from the NFL. I tried to convince myself that I'm feeling good, but I'm not, and it's time to prioritize my health and my family's future. I've given this team everything I have, and I thought I had more to give, but the reality is I simply don't. I've listened to my body, and this has been one of the hardest decisions of my life. The Lions organization has been absolutely incredible throughout this process, and I can't emphasize this enough, how grateful I am for this team and all the fans. It was an absolute honor going to battle for y'all. Disappointing to hear it's like that, with the injuries and stuff, but Frank Ragnow obviously was a great Razorback, so he is retiring from the NFL, former #1 draft pick. So kickoff times were announced for Arkansas football's first three games. What do you think about these? 3:15 p.m. against Alabama A&M. Let's have a game in early September at the hottest point of the day. Like, why? I don't understand that. I don't understand why you do it at 3:15. I mean, this one is actually being televised by SEC Network. Okay, so that's fine. But the Arkansas State game is ESPN Plus or SEC Network. It's at 4 o'clock. So to me, why aren't these switched? Why aren't you doing it seems like that would have more intrigue, but maybe just not outside the state. But anyway, 4 o'clock, two games that'll probably be pretty hot. And then you get Ole Miss at either 6 or 6:45 in Oxford, which I like. I like a night road game. I mean, people say it's better to have the 11 o'clock road game, but I don't mind a night game. So anyway, the first three game times have been set for football. This is something they started doing recently since ESPN has basically taken over all of the SEC games and there's no more CBS. CBS used to have the 10-day before they could decide, all that kind of stuff. SEC spring meetings wrapping up. A big point of emphasis has been the 9-game schedule, which we all knew was coming right when they said, we're going to hold things the way they are for these 8-game schedules because they're not getting rid of Alabama, Auburn. They're not getting rid of Georgia, Auburn. They'd have to drop one of those games, so it wouldn't make any sense to not keep it to a 9-game schedule. I like that better. I hope they still play. There's been some talk about playing Big Ten teams like the top 8 from the Big Ten and the SEC. I hope they keep playing tough out-of-conference teams. I'm not a big fan of playing Week 9, seeing, some program, East Tennessee State or something. Like there's no interest in that. I get early in the year you can get away with it because the interest is high, but late in the year maybe not. And I get why Sam Pittman's not the biggest fan of it. I mean, you look at Arkansas' schedule, they're once again playing in 4 different venues the first 4 games. Fayetteville for Alabama A&M, Little Rock for Arkansas State, Oxford, Mississippi for Ole Miss, Memphis, Tennessee for Memphis. That's your first 4 games. There's 3 scary games right there. I mean, Arkansas State is going to be hyped like never before to play Arkansas. You're at Ole Miss. It's obviously going to be difficult. Memphis is no pushover, especially in their home stadium. And then you're coming back for Notre Dame, Tennessee. You get you're at Tennessee, and then you get Texas A&M and Fayetteville. Auburn, and there's like a stretch here where you're like, if they can survive that, maybe they can do some stuff. Texas A&M and Fayetteville, Auburn and Fayetteville, Mississippi State and Fayetteville. That's a 3-game stretch. You'd like to think that they could win those if they can come out of this first part. But I get why Sam Pittman looking at the schedule is like, we want it tougher. Are we serious? Because the end of it is at LSU, at Texas, and then Missouri, who's obviously giving you fits. Look at Missouri's schedule. You can see why Drinkwitz may not care so much. Central Arkansas at Columbia. I always bring up Missouri's schedule. It's amazing that they're in the same conference with these schedules. Kansas in Columbia, Louisiana in Columbia, South Carolina in Columbia, Missouri, UMass in Columbia, Alabama in Columbia. First 6. There's 5 games there. I mean, they're set up really well to go 5-0, which generates a lot of interest, which keeps you nationally ranked, gets, good TV times when these times start coming out later. Like, there's so many benefits to having a schedule that sets up well for you at the beginning of the season. And Arkansas, I don't know if they've ever had it. I don't know if they've ever had that. Like, at least these last few years, and especially these last couple of years, they have not had that kind of schedule. So, frustrating. Scholarship distribution right now, we've got them at 85 total players, right at the limit of 85. This is assuming Jordan Anthony is going to stick to track. If you're Jordan Anthony, I don't know if you guys know, but he just ran a 9.75 at the West Regional in the 100 meters. That would be good enough for 6th ever, all-time history of the world, but it was wind aided, so you don't get that. But I mean, that's an incredible time. He won the 100 meters at the SEC. He won the 200 at the SEC. So really impressive stuff. But there has been nothing official yet on whether he will just stick to track. We'll see. I'm also told that there's one player that's going to graduate and basically retire from football, which will get them down to 84 if and when that happens. That has not been announced yet. So far, Bryce Stevens is the other guy that had announced that. Arkansas basketball, Kevin, we're coming to you here in just a second. Arkansas basketball still in a lot of way too early top 25 rankings. There's a good article by Connor Goodson just breaking down the roster. As we know, Edu Thero sticking with the NBA draft. Carter Knox did pull his name out and will return to Arkansas. That gives Arkansas 10 guys that you look at and you say that'll be the rotation. But there are some updated heights and weights. Malik Thomas will be wearing number 1, Darius Acuff number 5, Carter Knox 11, Trevin Brazile switching to number 7, Malik Ewan will be 12, and Nick Pringle will be 23, Creamer Tall will be 35, Isaiah Sealy will be 30. But there's some updated heights and weights. You can look at that, find all that information at HawgSports, HAWGsports.com, where, by the way, we are just $1 right now for your first month. So come check us out, $1 for your first month. Plenty of ways to watch and listen to the show. We are on Facebook, YouTube, X. You can watch us on all those different platforms. And, of course, you can listen to us on your favorite podcast platform. If you haven't taken a moment to give us a 5-star review on wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple Podcasts, for example, we would love to have 5-star rating. And we'd love for you to say something nice about the show if you enjoy it. Only if you enjoy it, if you like what we're doing. We appreciate that. We appreciate everybody for supporting what we do. NCAA regional winners, Arkansas, obviously, Auburn, who's the number 4 national seed, Florida State, Coastal Carolina, UCLA, Arizona, Duke, West Virginia, and UT San Antonio knocked out Texas. There's still games remaining. North Carolina, Oklahoma, Oregon State, Southern Cal, Ole Miss, Murray State, Tennessee, Wake Forest, LSU, Little Rock, Southern Miss, Miami. Let's bring in the man who knows what he's talking about when we talk baseball, and that is Kevin Bohannon. Kevin, how you doing?
I'm doing great. It's a great day in Arkansas, especially when you wake up off sweeping a regional like Arkansas did. Dominant fashion. That's what we were expecting from this team.
Yeah, it was obviously very impressive. What they did to Creighton on Saturday was wild, and then looked like they were going to do it again. And Creighton hit that 3-run home run. And I see your girl with you. Hello.
Yeah.
School's out.
School's out, baby.
School's out. So, just your thoughts on Arkansas's performance. I mean, it was pretty dominant, and Gage Wood was exceptional last night.
Yeah, that's the Gage Wood I expected coming out of high school. And in Batesville, he set every strikeout record you can imagine for Batesville High School, won the Gwatney Award for the best senior baseball player in the state that season. So, he hit some rough spots, and the injury set him back a little bit this year. But 13 strikeouts in 6 innings, that's his career high number of innings logged. He went career high in pitches, I believe, as well. And I talked to him last night. I said, man, he said, you just locked in. He said, I finally got a feel for my off-speed stuff. That was the differentiator last night. They couldn't lay off the fastball up. Once he went to the slider and curveball in the dirt, no matter what count it was, they couldn't pick up the spin. So great outing by him. Gabe Gackel follows that up with 3 innings of 7 strikeout, 2-hit ball. He gave up 2 hits in the 9th inning. So that's what you expected. So when you get a 1-2 punch like Root, and then you go to Wood and the bullpen, Dylan Carter didn't even throw. Cole Gibbler didn't even throw this weekend. So there were a lot of bullets left in the gun. And when you got 4 guys that hit at least 2 home runs in the weekend, that's a really deep lineup.
Kevin, we're watching this Tennessee Wake Forest game tonight, obviously. What are your thoughts about that? And overall, I mean, there's been so many, Texas got knocked out, Georgia. There's been a lot of, higher seeds that have lost, and it was a big day for the Force.
That's the great thing about college baseball is the parity, balance, whatever you want to call it. Okay, thank you. All right, that's the great thing about it is the parity, the balance, and somebody like Coastal Carolina, who's just a mid-major team, going through and sweeping their regional, getting rid of an SEC team like Florida. So, yeah, Wake and Tennessee is really big. There's only 2 SEC teams that have punched their ticket to the Super Regional so far. 13 made the tournament, and everybody was expecting 6 SEC teams to get to Omaha. It's not going to happen anymore. With NIL may be one thing, but there are so many good college baseball players around the nation, not just in the southeast part of the United States, that you're seeing that, come to the forefront this weekend. That's what makes baseball the purest of the sports, because somebody like a 4 seed, like Fresno State in 2008, can come through and win a national title.
So what are your thoughts on the way Arkansas is playing right now? Were they just a good matchup for the teams in the field, or are they finally, kind of regained? It seemed like they peaked at one point and kind of started slowing off, or have they re-peaked?
Yeah, it's a combination of both. I wrote in my preview article on Thursday that, look, Kansas was not TCU of 2023 or Kansas State of 2024. They were just not that good. They didn't have any first-round draft picks. Creighton's numbers were inflated because they play at Charles Schwab Field. Arkansas hit 9 home runs off of them in 2 games after they gave up 40 in their previous 45 or 46 or 56 games. So Arkansas did their part, but the field was down a little bit as well compared to the last couple of years. But out of anybody, they look like the most complete team. You've heard national pundits, whether it be SEC SEC Network guys, ESPN, Division D1 baseball, Baseball America. They think this Arkansas team is the deepest and most complete team in the field. So that's left.
So what do you think about the way things have shaped up? Obviously, you mentioned Arkansas being the deepest. They are the highest seed left right now.
Right.
What do you think about the field as it's shaping up right now, and then these remaining games? How do you kind of see things playing out?
Yeah. Arkansas has the toughest road. I mean, Tennessee is going to be a tough matchup for them because they can throw Liam Doyle, which Tennessee threw Doyle on Friday night against their first-round opponent. So that, knocked him out for the rest of the week. And he may throw an inning or 2 tonight. Just depends. But LSU scares me. Even though Little Rock has taken them to a game 7, having Ianson and Cade Anderson, who may be the first pitcher off the board in the MLB draft in July, those are 2 tough teams. So Arkansas, and I say LSU because that's who Arkansas would match up with should both teams get to Omaha. That's the first-round matchup right there. So it's a tougher road, but you got to beat these teams at some point, get them out early while you can, and have Tennessee in Fayetteville at Baum-Walker Stadium. That's the great equalizer.
That's interesting. So obviously you know a lot more about baseball. I'm a casual watcher. But so we know that if Arkansas and LSU make it to Omaha, that will be their first game.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So the way it sets up, 1-8, the national seeds of 1-8, which Vanderbilt's gone, so you don't have to worry about them. And then the 8th seed, which is Oregon State, is gone. So you're now looking at a possible Florida State, Louisville on that side of the bracket, and then out of the teams left, North Carolina and maybe Auburn on one side of the bracket. And then on Arkansas side, obviously, if LSU wins tonight, they'll play West Virginia next week in the Super Regionals. LSU will, of course, host that. And then the other side is UCLA or University of Texas at San Antonio will make a World Series appearance this year, and they'll likely play Duke or Ole Miss, which Duke looked really good. They had some controversy. They had a kid get thrown out of the game for wearing his Bob the Builder hat after hitting a home run and stepping out of the dugout to congratulate his teammate for scoring from first on a single. So some of the things in baseball you kind of shake your head out, but the College World Series field is a lot easier now than it was this time last week.
What surprised you about this baseball team this year as we're obviously in the postseason, but has the season kind of gone about like you expected? I know you did a preseason, picks of every game, every series, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they performed better. And I think the biggest thing was the chemistry. Anytime you flip a roster and you replace 7 starters, it's going to be tough to pair the old guys with the new guys. And Coach Van Horn has said from the get-go, these guys like each other. They like playing with each other. There's not a lot of drama, and that's the biggest thing. You don't have a lot of kids coming in that have a sense of self-entitlement. That's the biggest thing. You don't do that and play for Dave Van Horn. If you come in with self-entitlement issues, you don't stay but one semester. He has shown that. He's kicked top 50 recruits to the curb after one semester. So that's been the biggest thing. And Vahiva Lloyd taking the next step. The other guys taking the next step in their progression. Ryder Helfrich, Cam Kojal. Those guys, Kojal and Helfrich especially, have made a lot of money this year with their performance. Helfrich's likely to be the first catcher off the board next season in the 2026 draft.
All right, Kevin. Well, we appreciate your insight and everything. Of course, we'll be checking in with you again as we find out more about this Super Regional coming up and more baseball to talk.
Absolutely. We'll see you, bud. Thanks.
All right, bud. All right, everybody. That's Kevin Bohannon, and he had a special guest with him, as you saw. Handled that pretty well. I've been there myself with my daughter wanting to pop into the show. Danny's got some daughters, too. He's a girl dad as well, and we're going to bring him onto the show. Danny West is obviously Arkansas's number 1 recruiting expert. Danny, some visitors came in. Yeah, visitors coming in this weekend. So this is the first time for official visitors, and Arkansas had a number of them.
Yeah, I thought it was a sneaky good weekend is how I would describe it, Trey. It was, a group of 8. List kind of shrunk since the last time I talked to you. I think we were at maybe 12, 13 a couple of weeks ago, but the list went down. I thought it was again, a sneaky good one at the top. We'll start with the highest ranked. I'm sure that's what everybody wants to hear about. But Chase Campbell, 4-star receiver out of Friendship High School in Texas, number 153 overall. He's, I bet you probably remember his dad, Biddy, Marcus Campbell. You familiar? Back in the day, mid-90s.
Yeah, I remember Marcus Campbell. Of course.
Yeah, Marcus Campbell played defensive back for the Razorbacks. He picked off 7 passes in 22 games there in the mid-90s, and he was back on campus this weekend. His wife, who ran track for the Razorbacks, they were both, very excited to see their son back on the hill. Chase, of course, was born in Fayetteville, and really excited to get back there and check it out. I think, Trey, they're in a really good spot with him. It sounded like he was still going to take a couple more visits. So we'll see on that. But, man, there's a lot of reasons to like Arkansas there right now. Moving on down the list, Bryce Gilmore, probably one of the, I'd say, top 10 offensive line prospects I've seen for sure come through Arkansas. Just really impressive. You hear people talk so much about length, and it's funny, but at the offensive tackle position, what does that mean? It's long arms, wingspan, and that's what this guy's got. I mean, you think about the NFL, Trey, the Kansas City Chiefs, that's what it always comes back to, right? But Andy Reid, he won't draft a tackle with arms shorter than 34 inches. And this kid just finished his junior year of high school with 34.5-inch arms. He's got 83-inch wingspan. He's 6'5", 294. He's pretty, as Sam Pittman would call him. So I think they're in a really good spot there. It's probably a testament to Eric Mateos and the job he's done with Bryce. But I think they're in a good spot with Bryce. And then, from there it drops to some 3-star level guys. But I think, again, they're probably a little bit better than people give them credit for. Had some Carolina kids, Jordan Avenger. I kept wanting to say Avenger all weekend, but it's Avenger, 6'3", 225. Everybody likes him at linebacker. Arkansas wants him at running back. He's kind of going back and forth weighing those options right now, but kind of look like Rocket Sanders to me a little bit, just 6'2". I'd give him 6'2", 230, somewhere in that range, yoked up.
Right now. He's reminding you of Rocket Sanders.
Yeah.
That's a go.
Yeah. He's big old yoked up dude. Looks like you in that T-shirt, man.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. But,
medium.
But Caleb Gordon, another linebacker coming out of North Carolina. He was, 6 foot, 215, really good looking athlete. I think they're in a good spot there. And then moving on down the list, Trey Irvin, Bentonville wide receiver, 6 foot, about 170 there. He was back on the hill. Looking good for Arkansas. Ronnie Fouch going at it with wide receivers. Already got Prevost out of Texarkana, now working on Campbell and Irvin. I think if you can get those three, that'd be a really good haul. And, kind of already looking forward to next weekend. Got a lot of defensive tackles coming in, a lot of safeties. Tylen Wilson is a guy we'll be talking about a lot, in the coming weeks. He's a 4-star safety. Got a 4-star defensive tackle, Darian Albert out of Mississippi, another 4-star. So, we're right back into it, buddy. It's been busy and fresh off vacation, head already spinning.
Danny, I'm going to take you to Negative Town. Why didn't Danny Bill visit?
Say again?
Danny Bill, he was listed as a potential visitor and didn't end up visiting, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, we'll see if he makes that up. But it's just, again, going back to in-state recruiting, man, it's just not much to be excited about at the moment, is there? And
why is there it's one of the higher ranked classes, and obviously we've seen classes that have been really highly ranked, and one guy after another doesn't pan out. But you've got Danny Beal, who's 6'4", 315, out of Cross County, Evan Goodwin out of Bauxite, Terry Hodges out of Mark Tree, Ja'Cory Smith, who's committed to Oklahoma. And Anthony Kennedy Jr., all 4-star prospects. 5 is a pretty high number of 4-star prospects for the state. But the activity, you're right, it doesn't seem to be as high for Sam Pittman, and maybe it's just because of the results that Inside the State has produced.
I think it is. There's a trend going on now, and it hasn't been a good one, has it? I mean, you look at it, and we've kind of broken it down over the last couple of weeks, and I'm still working on that. Going into vacation, I dived in pretty good on that one, but I had to pump the brakes and take some time off. But I've got a study going on that shows exactly what Arkansas has been getting from inside the state, and it's just not good enough to support an SEC program. It never has been. That's not breaking news of any sort. But again, I think it's it's time to change the way we look at things and change how we view the perception sometimes of an in-state kid choosing to go elsewhere. In this day and age, I'm just not sure it's worth getting all that upset about. I mean, you can get him back in a year, you can get him back in 3 years, and you're probably going to get a much better player that you didn't have to worry about. And didn't have to beg, for 3 years to stick with you.
I've always felt like if Arkansas can embrace NIL and all this stuff, that the transfer portal is the avenue for Arkansas to get much better players, because it's just more remote than other SEC towns, and Arkansas as a state anyway, even though they're a low population state of 3 million people, they don't produce per capita like Mississippi does, for example.
And demographics, people kind of bounce around that. Nobody wants to talk about it, but that's a big deal. It's a real big deal.
It is. Arkansas currently ranks 16th in the country. They have 15 commitments. That's one of the reasons that they're ranked so highly. Their average recruit ranking is not exceedingly high, though, Danny. It's 87.2, which is somewhere around last in the SEC. What are your thoughts on the recruiting class that has come together so far? And it feels like maybe there's an idea with Sam Pittman in Arkansas that, you go out and you get offensive linemen and stuff like that, and, guys that you want to develop in your program, and maybe you go out and get skill guys, out of the portal and stuff. Am I thinking that, like, thinking long term? Obviously, they had to get a lot of offensive linemen this year because they had things to fix. But am I right in that kind of assumption?
I think so, and I think the proof will be seen again in this high school class. They signed a big O-line class, signed a big defensive line class out of high school, and I think they will again because I think they're trying to replenish that. I mean, once they got into it around 2020, 2021, where you start going, for example, the defensive line problem. We know for a fact, Arkansas can't go into these SEC states and compete with Alabama, Georgia, LSU, and be getting these 4- and 5-star defensive tackle guys. So they had to bridge that gap with the portal. And my point is, once you get into that cycle, it's hard to get out of it. You know what I mean? Because you can't just suddenly say, all right, let's get back to recruiting 5-star defensive linemen. Once you're in there, you've got to keep getting them 3 or 4 a year. And I don't see a problem with that. I think you get a more mature defensive lineman, physically. A lot of times, you get a guy that's maybe just had a little bit of taste of the NFL, sniffing around at him, and maybe he wants to improve that stock, and you can go get a lower level guy who's put in 2 or 3 years of work and developed, and he's just as good or better than that 4 or 5-star kid that's, going into his freshman year. So taking a long way around that, but yeah, I think you're on to something there. That's probably the ideal scenario, but at the same time, again, I think we're seeing a shift right now in high school recruiting where Arkansas sits back and goes, all right, the last 2 years we've finished, outside the top 30. I'm sure they're not concerned with our rankings, overly concerned, but from a perception standpoint, I think you have to look at that and go, man, we're recruiting our butts off. We're going after the right kids. And right now, even the in-state kids don't want to come. We're getting better players outside of the state. Let's just keep doing that and then say, to heck with it. We'll fill those spots from the in-state misses with transfer guys who are ready to go. And I think
a lot of it too, Danny, like, where do you want to spend your money? You want to spend, $500,000 on, a top 100 prospect that isn't going to be ready for a couple of years, or, a guy that can come in and help you immediately. And that's just been the formula. Like, people can point to the idea that it's best to recruit from the high school ranks and develop from within your program. But we're also talking about schools like Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State that do that anyway. And Ohio State, they all fill in from the transfer portal too. But you're talking about blue blood programs that are good anyway. Ole Miss, I think, is living proof that you can do things through the transfer portal and really elevate your program. Arkansas has had a lot of attrition, a lot of new faces obviously coming in. I mean, it's pretty wild. I think 34 players, depending on how you look at it. Like, there's guys that like Shoffrey Brown took a medical hardship and then entered the transfer portal. Is he a transfer out? There's things like that too. But, roughly 34 to 36 players on scholarship left the program. I've seen people report higher numbers because they're counting walk-ons and stuff, which I wouldn't count. But that's a lot of turnover for a program, and it happened last year too. A lot of change. But I would rather, people don't get overly excited about Division II players or FCS players, but I would rather take a guy that has really produced at that level, like a John Ridgway, for example, over some 4-star who hasn't played and hasn't contributed and hasn't done anything. Guys that are basically like not living up to the what they were supposed to be. I think that's a better path. But there's different kinds of transfers that you can get. You can go get those guys from lower level, which Arkansas has had success with. Or even G5 level players, if we're talking about that, or you can go get the guy that was super highly regarded and hasn't really lived up yet.
Yeah,
which Arkansas has had some guys like that. I mean, Drew Sanders and Xavier Story. There's been some.
Absolutely. Hey, quick shout out to Frank Ragnow, man. One of the best players I'll ever cover.
Yeah.
One of the best people I know, man. So
the Narfwanger.
hey, good luck to the smallmouth up in Minnesota. It's going to be brutal. Hit me up, Frank. I'll go with you.
Yeah. It's sad to see Frank having to retire for
Yeah.
medical reasons, and he was
Something about the lines, man. We've seen that a lot, haven't we? You think about Calvin Johnson and Barry Sanders, of course, and Frank being one of the best linemen they've ever had, and he's moving on. Good luck to him.
All right, brother. All right, appreciate you, Danny. Thanks for hopping on. Wait, real quick before I let you go, anything coming up this weekend?
Yeah, check the site later. I've got a notebook coming out. Sorry, it didn't get going this morning. It's a travel weekend, and I was slow going, but looking at around a dozen right now for next weekend. Going to be a pretty good. I mentioned a couple of them there. Darian Albert, stud, 4-star kid. Tylen Wilson, big time safety. A couple of Mississippi guys. Marcus Woodson targets. So I'll have more on those guys here shortly, Trey. But just trying to get wrapped up from yesterday, right back into it.
Danny, I always say the measure of a good vacation is like at the end, last couple of days, you're like ready to get on back home.
Yeah.
Did you have that feeling?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, as soon as I got there.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to turn it off, brother.
I know.
And I stayed in trouble those first couple of days, just checking baseball scores and trying to see who's coming in this weekend. And you finally have to force yourself to go throw the phone in the ocean, get rid of it,
I hear you, man. All right. Well, good to have you back, Danny.
Yes, sir. See you.
All right. Appreciate you. All right, everybody. That's Danny West. Again, follow Danny at Danny West 247 on X and read all of his content at HawgSports, HAWGsports.com. Again, $1 right now for your first month at HawgSports. Okay. Let's see if we cover everything we wanted to cover. Recruiting. Touched on some football, touched on some basketball, baseball, of course. See if we got some questions here on the message board. We're going to the Razor's Edge Premium VIP Forum. See if we got some questions for HawgSports today. All right. Thor Hog says he's got 3 questions. Did Danny Bill visit this weekend? No, he did not. When does Anthony Kennedy Jr. take his official visit to Arkansas? I don't know if that's scheduled yet. So, yeah, Evan Goodwin and Ja'Cory Smith. Ja'Cory Smith's committed to Oklahoma, so don't know if they're going to take those visits or not. Sorry. Will the University of Arkansas make football a priority again in our lifetime? I get the frustration with football, people. I really do. I'll say this. Football is, 74% of the revenue? I hear a lot of talk like we're a baseball school or we're a basketball school now or softball school or all this kind of stuff. But Arkansas is still a football school. Like, the results aren't there, obviously. But the revenue, the fan interest, like if for Arkansas to give up on football or just be fine with being mediocre, would be a tremendous disservice to that program because, there's already a lot of apathy, but it picks up. It picks up again this summer. People will start, getting the juices flowing again. You'll hear some ridiculous prognostications about what Arkansas football can be this season and their chances to do this or that. Sometimes that kind of stuff happens. Sometimes it doesn't. But the idea of settling for being a mediocre football program when you generate that much revenue and there's potential for even more would be absurd to do that. And if anybody is doing that, I want them gone. I would want them out of here. If you're just we're good with that. And I don't think that's the case. It's just, it's difficult, but there is some sense to me sometimes with football that Arkansas is chasing. They're not at the forefront on, this idea or this move or this decision. At the same time, I think Arkansas gets a really raw deal when it comes to scheduling. I mean, this schedule is just awful. And some of this is Arkansas's fault. Playing this game in Little Rock, obviously Alabama A&M to open finally in Fayetteville. It's been 3 years since they've opened in their home football stadium. But, scheduling this game in Memphis is stupid. That was a stupid decision, whoever did that. I think it's Jeff Long. Stupid. Memphis, at Memphis, a program that is competitive. I don't. It just doesn't make any sense. Scheduling Notre Dame, like, again, that's a stupid thing to schedule. You are not on a level as a football program right now where you should be playing teams like Notre Dame, Michigan, so on and so forth. Oklahoma State, okay. BYU, let's do it. Utah even, let's do it. Notre Dame, like that Michigan series, thankfully got scheduled, canceled, even though I wanted to go to the Big House. But like that's not good scheduling. And then, at the end of it, the SEC is going to stick it to you. The SEC, your good old buddies in the SEC office down in Hoover, they're going to give you your first 2 SEC games. We're going to send them at Ole Miss, and then we're going to send them at Tennessee. You should never be forced to play your first 2 conference games on the road. Never. That should never happen. And it's happened in the past because Arkansas made the stupid decision years ago to play this ridiculously long series with Texas A&M. When that series stopped being a conference, or when it stopped being a non-conference game, the idea that you would keep that game in Arlington is just absurd. It's stupid. It was a stupid decision. Everybody hated it. The people at Arkansas right now don't like it. People at Texas A&M probably do, but they don't love it. They've got that huge stadium that they probably like to play their games there. But that was what Arkansas was penalizing itself with. And they were playing SEC games in War Memorial Stadium still for a long time. It's just not that era anymore. You can't do that. It's such a competitive disadvantage. But in this case, Arkansas finally has a home game against Texas A&M, and the SEC still gives them Ole Miss, still gives them Tennessee on the road as their first 2 SEC games. That's challenging. This opening slate is rough. Like, again, first 4 games, 4 different venues. Missouri's first 6 games are all in one venue, all in Columbia. They know what they're doing. And I've said this before, like I've kind of mocked Missouri's schedule. I'm not saying Arkansas 2 years ago with Missouri's schedule, which was, again, soft by comparison. I'm not saying Arkansas would have gone, 11-2 with that schedule. I don't think they would have. I don't think they would have gone 4-8 that year. So, credit to Missouri for, capitalizing on the schedule, but also credit to them for knowing how to schedule. You set yourself up at the beginning of the season. And if you do that, you build some momentum. You got some life about you, buy-in. Hey, what these coaches are telling us is working. We just got to do what they say, versus playing a team that's been battered early in the season and has lost confidence. Not only do you get crappy time slots and you're not in the top 25 rankings, nobody's talking about you early in the season, you've already wet the bed. Even if you were somehow to have things open up the second half of the season, the die is already cast for you. You got to learn how to schedule Arkansas. You're your own worst enemy. You have been your own worst enemy. I used to be a proponent for Little Rock games, but I'm not anymore. And I'm from that part of the state, so don't anybody call me a Northwest Arkansas elitist. I'm from Sheridan. I grew up in North Little Rock. In elementary school and junior high and high school in Sheridan. I'm from this area, and I grew up I did not go to my first Fayetteville game till I was a senior in high school when I came up for a rush weekend. But it just doesn't make sense anymore to me, especially playing, obviously SEC games, and they're not doing that anymore. But opening the season, I never liked that, opening the season away from your home venue. But Arkansas, to me, does themselves a disservice, but they also get jobbed by the SEC. There's no way around that. It's obvious that the SEC is just like, tough crap, Arkansas. Take it or don't. All right. So back to the questions. I got to get out of here in just a little bit. I've got a meeting. Yeah, that was just about, will the University of Arkansas make football a priority? Some Pig 836, appreciate the question. Razorback in NYC, how does our summer visit list compare to our competitors? Sorry, that would have been a question for Danny. Sorry, Razorback NYC. Maybe Danny can come in and answer this question. Again, these are on the Razor's Edge VIP message board. Could a new coach get us in the top 25 in recruiting every season, or is Sam's recruiting the best we can do regardless of who's in charge? No, I think that could happen. The problem is you're just like in this vicious cycle of, your recruiting class is not panning out or players leaving. You have to rely on the transfer portal. You're behind. And for Sam Pittman, every season is do or die. So they have to win right away. They can't invest in developing a program. A lot of times you see a new coach come in, they throw a lot of young players in, try to develop them, throw them to the wolves kind of thing, throw them into the fire and develop them that way. Obviously it's a different era of college football, so that's maybe not the same type of deal, but if you did have a new coach, I would imagine, you're going to dip down because you're going to be late on the transfer portal. You're going to have to re-recruit players and stuff. You had that initial program dip, but you do have a little time to develop a program, versus, with Pittman, he's got to win. He's got to win this year. And how do you win? With older, experienced, veteran players. And that's how they built this roster. That's how they put it together. So it's just where things are. But to me, top 25 in recruiting every season, yes, that would be important, obviously, at certain positions especially. But, for Arkansas, I just feel like the way to even the playing field is through the transfer portal, because you can get players from all over the country who have been through the college experience. They've heard all the recruiting pitches and hype and stuff. They know what's real and what's not. They're looking to get paid, obviously, but they're also looking for a place where they can advance their football career. And sometimes it becomes more obvious that that's not a nearby school. And that's what's hurt Arkansas in recruiting in the past is players tend to go closer to home. They just do. Not always, but generally. And we talk about, football players inside the state, and Danny, was kind of mentioning that, it hasn't always produced well, but some of Arkansas's best teams have been built with players inside the state. Not all of them are 4-stars. A lot of them are guys that were developed in the program. Jamal Anderson was a 2-star. Antoine Robinson was a 3-star recruit who was a good player. That defensive line at Arkansas, it was that Robinson back then? Or that's before, I think. Or was it? There was a defensive line at Arkansas one year that was all Arkansas players like Keith Jackson Jr. and Marcus Harrison, Antoine Robinson, and was it Jamal? Maybe it was. Anyway, it was all Arkansas players. And, obviously you have to have players from other states and stuff, but that wide receiver core we were talking about with Jarius Wright and Joe Adams, Greg Child, those are all Arkansas guys. Ryan Mallett was, born in Arkansas, considers himself an Arkansan, and he went to Texarkana High, but, so on and so forth. Chad Razorback says the 2026 class is bad as its average rating makes it look, or are people overreacting? I think, again, just like kind of what Danny said, is Arkansas is prioritizing where they spend their money, and it's on older, veteran, more proven players versus – because it's a great, in-state crop for that year. And generally when it's a great in-state crop, that's meant Arkansas is going to have a top 25 recruiting class, but they just don't seem to be really prioritizing that as much, and maybe looking to guys that they feel are players that they can develop from within their program. Hog fan RJH. Thoughts on Ragnow's retirement and overall career dating back to Arkansas? Yeah, Frank was a guy that does it a little bit. I always say the best offensive linemen, in my opinion, are guys that you bring in who are massive and you take some weight off of them, because if you do that, I think they move better. They drop that weight, and I feel like they feel more athletic. And versus a guy that is a certain weight and you pack a bunch of weight on him. There's two ways to build offensive linemen: reduction and addition, I guess. Frank Ragnow was a guy that was probably 250 when they went up and visited him the first time. He was a guy that it goes against that theory that I had. But he was a great guy. Loved Frank when he was up here. He was a great interview. He would speak his mind. A lot of times, and this is obviously Sports Information's job to coach these guys on how to interview and all this stuff. But a lot of times what happens is they get a little paranoid. It takes their personality away sometimes. They, give a lot of who's standing out today at practice? Everybody's standing out. that kind of discussion. But Frank, I always thought was able to adhere to that and understood like what they're trying to teach him, but also you had his personality come through, and he was a great interview. Was happy to see him, be a first round draft pick and have success in a career that you would have hoped was longer. Web 11 says, how about them Hogs? How about them? All right, everybody. We're going to hop off here now. Appreciate everybody for joining us. Thanks to Kevin Bohannon and his special guest as well, Danny West, of course. Appreciate all of you guys for your comments and participation. And sign up at HawgSports if you haven't done so already. We'd really appreciate that. Give us a 5-star review. Let's look and see when's the last 5-star review we've had. And I know we haven't been doing the show as regular, so maybe it's a big ask to throw us a review when we haven't done it as much. Last weekend was Memorial Day. Got a lot of excuses, I guess, don't I? But, all right, here's May 19th from Lands 1964. Great podcast. My favorite podcast to keep me current on all things Razorback. Great to listen while riding my bike. Just wish there was a new one every day. I understand, man. We will, football season kicks up. We'll be back on the regular schedule again. I just don't feel like maybe there's enough to talk about every single day and keep it as entertaining as I'd like to this time of year. But we'll be back with you guys again next week. Maybe we'll do something midweek. I don't know. Just depends. But appreciate all you guys joining us. Thanks to Danny West, Kevin Bohannon, and all of you as well. All right, everybody. This has been Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com. We'll catch you next time.